This lesson is about the United States, which is where I am from, and I want to teach you some regional vocabulary, which I think is useful for any foreigner who may be living there, as well as anyone who is just going to visit the US. So if you enjoy building your vocabulary, please subscribe, turn on notifications. That way I can become your teacher. My name is Wes. The channel is Interactive English. It's all about trying to help you reach your fluency goals. So I want you to participate in this lesson, all right? I want you to think about, well, what vocabulary word or phrase would you use to describe these certain things? And here is the first one, okay? What would you call this if somebody were to ask you, hey, would you like a, all right, we're talking about a carbonated beverage. So overwhelmingly in the United States, and I think in English throughout the world, people are going to use the word soda and just say, yeah, would you like a soda? Now, a long time ago, in the 1800s, when these carbonated beverages first came out, people would use the phrase soda pop. It's not common nowadays. Most people have just taken that first word, soda, and they've just run with it. However, in some places in the US, such as some of those Midwestern states like Wisconsin and Minnesota, people may say pop. Would you like a pop? And they're talking about a carbonated beverage. Now, if you're from the South, which is where I grew up, you may hear people just use the word Coke. And I know Coke is the name of a brand. This Coke was invented in Atlanta, Georgia. It has deep roots in the South. And it's so popular, so well known, that people may use the word Coke when referring to any carbonated beverage. Would you like a Coke? Would you like a soda? Or maybe would you like a pop? So I've given you this map right here just to give you an idea as to where people may use these different words. That does not mean, this is my disclaimer, that if you are in this area that everyone is going to use this word. I told you most people in the US are going to say soda. There are many transplants across the country, which is another great word. It refers to a person who moves to a new place. Therefore, there's a lot of mixing going on. You're going to hear people in different parts of the country use a variety of words based on where they grew up or their own experience. So this map is just to give you a general idea as to where you may hear people use some of these different words and phrases. And if you would like to get a copy of these beautiful, lovely maps, well, check out the link down in the description, because when you join our email community, then you can access this lovely ebook with this different regional vocabulary. Let's look at the next one. What would you call these insects right here? These small little insects that I think technically they're beetles and they're related to the glowworm because their butts light up. So what would you call these small insects right here? They're really beautiful to watch in the evening. There are two different words that you may hear people use. I think most places throughout the United States, they're going to say that these insects are fireflies. However, if you're in the South, again, which is where I grew up, people may call them lightning bugs. And this is actually something that I have experience with, because when I was younger, I would visit family in North Carolina and see them, and I would constantly hear and talk about lightning bugs. And it wasn't until I got a little older that I heard people talking about fireflies, and I realized, oh, it's the same insect. We're talking about the same thing. So you may hear people say fireflies or lightning bugs if you're in the South. Let's stay in the South for just a little bit, and I want to see how well you know your Southern dialect, because most people throughout the United States would refer to a group of people as you guys. And it doesn't matter if it's a group of men and women, or only a group of men, or only a group of women. It's pretty common to refer to that group and say you guys. Except in the South, you may hear people use this instead. It's a contraction. I imagine you've heard this word watching, well, TV shows or movies. And in the South, you may hear people say y'all. This is a contraction, stands for you all, and it's just reduced to y'all. Y'all want a Coke, and then we can go to the park and watch the lightning bugs? Right? That's something somebody may say, and they use all of those phrases right there. Now, I catch myself using both from time to time. I grew up in the South, but I've lived in many other places throughout the United States. Most of the time, I would say you guys, but every now and then I catch myself using y'all. Now, in the United States, many people live in the suburbs. They live in homes, and sometimes they may have this informal event in which they sell used items, sometimes new things, just right out in front of their home. There's no business license needed. They just take some of their used stuff and they set it up right in front of their yard, and people may walk by, and sometimes they buy something. And this is called, what do you think? There are three different phrases that you may hear people use: garage sale, yard sale, or tag sale. Okay, so I think in general, most people are going to use either a garage sale or a yard sale. There is that one little tiny spot in the Northeast that may say tag sale. And I think this is more common in the state of Connecticut. I actually used to live in Connecticut back when I was in middle school, and I would see signs sometimes people would put up in front of their yard that says tag sale. We're having a tag sale. But most people are going to say either garage sale or yard sale, and they would. They may put up a sign in front of their yard advertising this informal event. Don't confuse this with the larger market in which there are many vendors selling different things, mostly used things, but that market is called a flea market. So just remember, a garage sale, yard sale, or even a tag sale is an informal event in which people are just selling things right out in front of their home. And how about this next one? What would you call this? There are two different answers, and I think both of them are pretty common throughout the country, so you could say either one and nobody's really going to give it much thought. But the two different phrases that I'm talking about are either trash can or garbage can. The only thing I'd really like to point out, as you can see on the map, it seems like the Pacific Northwest has a stronger preference for saying garbage can, while I think many other parts of the country would just say trash can. Personally, I feel like I use both of them. If we're talking about some like one that's inside the home, I think overwhelmingly I would just say trash can. If it's outside the home, then maybe I might use either one, but that's just me personally. And just to teach you one more vocabulary word, the place where you dump your trash can or garbage can is called a dumpster. All right there. And this, you will only see those outside. Here's the next one. What would you call this right here? There are three different words or phrases that you may hear people use throughout the US. Two of them I think are much more common than the third one. So overwhelmingly, I think people, especially on the East Coast, are going to say water fountain. On the West Coast, I think you're more likely to hear people use drinking fountain. And you can see that little bit of purple right there. In certain places in the Northeast, as well as in the Midwest, people may call this a bubbler. But it's not as common as the others. Most of the time, people are going to say drinking fountain or water fountain. And this candy right here that many children love is called, what do you think? There are two different words people may use. I know what I used to say back when I lived in the South. So most of the time people are going to call this a lollipop because that is the actual name of this hard candy. It's a lollipop. However, a long time ago, informally, people started calling it a sucker because you would suck on the lollipop. Nowadays, if people use the word sucker, you're more likely to hear this in the South or even a little bit in the Midwest, but just be careful because the word sucker, it's also an informal word referring to a gullible person that you can easily trick, and you could say this person is a sucker. So just keep that in mind. It's a word that has multiple meanings. How about this right here? What would you call this roadway? And this can be a little tricky because I think people often may use them interchangeably. So you may hear people call this roadway either a freeway or a highway, but there is a difference between the two, and I think even many Americans might not know the difference. It's one of those things in which all highways are freeways, but not all freeways are highways, okay? Sounds like a little bit of a riddle. It's kind of like both thumbs are fingers, but not all fingers are thumbs. One of those types of things. So let me explain the difference. So the subtle difference would be access to the road, because highways, they're larger roads. They may have multiple lanes of traffic, but there could also be cross traffic as well, and you may have to stop. Whereas freeways have controlled access, which means there's no cross traffic, you're not going to have to stop, and generally you may have to go up a ramp in order to get on a freeway. But even though there's a difference, people may use them interchangeably, especially on the East Coast. However, on the West Coast, it is more common for people to use the word freeway. And keep in mind, you do not want to confuse these words with interstate. And once again, some people may end up using all three words interchangeably, but an interstate is like a freeway. It has controlled access, except it's going to cross from one state to the next. Now, something that you may not have known has to do with the numbers, because whether you're talking about a freeway, a highway, or interstate, if the number is odd, then it's referring to a roadway that goes north-south, and if it's even, then the roadway goes east-west. Just a little food for thought. Now let's take a trip to the grocery store. What would you say this is? So overwhelmingly, most people in the United States are going to call this a grocery cart. That phrase is most widespread. But there are areas that may use the word carriage, such as in the Northeast, or even buggy in parts of the South or Midwest. But pretty much anywhere you go, you could just call this a grocery cart. Now, you may not always be in a grocery store, but still use this cart, in which case people would just refer to this as a shopping cart. And if you go to a playground, you may see this. What would you call it? Because in the US, you may hear people use a couple of different names. So I think most people in the US are going to call this a teeter-totter. And I believe that's also what they would say in Canada as well. But when I was a kid in the South, I would hear people use the word seesaw. And I believe people would also say seesaw in British English. So this is an instance in which Southern dialect and British English overlap. And it's interesting because when I think of other parts of the Southern dialect, like y'all, much of it seems very distinct from British English, except if you're talking about a seesaw. So I hope this lesson has been insightful, because language, it gives us a glimpse into the culture. And I know many of you who watch these lessons, you live in the US or you travel to the US often, and learning the different names of these very common things, I think it can help. So you'll know whether to ask someone for a soda or a pop, or the next time you're traveling somewhere, you'll know if you're on a freeway or a highway, or the next time you go to a playground, you'll know if those kids are on a teeter-totter or a seesaw. If you enjoyed the lesson and learned something new, please hit that like button. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. So long.